Maura Murray.
Maura Murray's.
Maura Murray.
Maura Murray.
She was 21 years old. She crashed her car on a dark, frozen road. A man stopped to help her. She said no. She said, "Do not call the police." He left. 7 minutes later, officers arrived. Her car was locked. Her gloves were on the seat. Her coat was in the back. But she was gone. No footprints. No scream. No trace. Just silence. And a road that swallowed her whole.
Maura Murray. What happened to Maura Murray?
UMass student disappeared. She crashed her car in New Hampshire.
But when police arrived, the car was locked and Maura was gone.
I do believe the case is solvable. We just need the few puzzle pieces that are missing.
February 9th, 2004, a nursing student named Maura Murray drove alone into the darkness of rural New Hampshire. She was not just a missing persons case. She was a daughter who called her father every single night. And one evening she simply stopped calling. Nobody knows exactly why she left. Nobody knows exactly where she was going. And nobody, not the FBI, not veteran detectives, not the journalists who spent years on this case, not even her own family knows what happened to her after her car crashed on a quiet bend in Route 112. What we do know is this. A neighbor heard the crash and looked out her window. A bus driver stopped, spoke to Maura face-to-face, and offered her help. She refused. She specifically asked him, "Do not call the police." Minutes later, she was gone. No footprints leading into the woods. No confirmed sightings down the road. No body ever recovered. Just an abandoned car, a broken wine box, and 2 gloves sitting exactly where she left them. For 21 years, this case has refused to close. Investigators have followed leads into dead ends. Online communities have built entire theories around single sentences. Her father spent decades walking these same roads, searching for answers that never came. And then, March 2025. A fingerprint found inside Maura's car was matched to a name for the very first time. 21 years of silence, and suddenly, everything shifted. Tonight on Hidden Truth, we are going inside this case completely. Every witness, every suspect, every piece of evidence that disappeared was destroyed or was never explained. Because somewhere inside this story, the truth is still waiting. This is the disappearance of Maura Murray. Before she became a case number. Before her face appeared on missing persons posters. Before the FBI, the detectives, the online investigators, and the journalists, she was just a girl from Massachusetts who wanted to help people. Maura Ann Murray was born on May 4th, 1982, in Hanson, a quiet working-class town south of Boston. She was the 4th of 5 children in a family held together by discipline, faith, and a deep love of sport. Her parents divorced when she was still young, but both remained present in her life, and the absence of a perfect home never stopped Maura from building something extraordinary for herself. From the very beginning, she outworked everyone around her. By the time she reached high school, Maura had already established herself as one of the most accomplished student athletes Whitman-Hanson Regional High School had ever seen. She ran cross-country and track, competed at the national level, and finished 33rd in the entire country in the 2-mile category during the U.S. National Scholastic Outdoor Championships while she was still a sophomore. But athletics were only half of who she was. Her sister Julie later described Maura in a way that stayed with everyone who heard it. She would blush if you mentioned any of these accolades. She wasn't doing it for attention. That humility ran through everything Maura did. In high school, she volunteered at the same nursing home where her mother worked. She sat with elderly patients, told them stories, and made them laugh. Not because anyone asked her to, simply because it felt right. Now ask yourself something. When was the last time you heard about a nationally ranked athlete spending weekends making strangers smile in a nursing home? That was Maura Murray. After graduating near the top of her class, she received a congressional nomination from the late Senator Edward Kennedy and accepted a place at the United States Military Academy at West Point, one of the most selective and demanding institutions in the entire country. She followed her older sister Julie through those gates and excelled inside a program designed to break most people who attempt it. She ran on the cross-country and track teams. She maintained her grades inside a brutally rigorous academic environment. And according to everyone who knew her, she did all of it without once asking for recognition. But sometime during her second year, something shifted. The military path that once felt right began to feel wrong. Maura made a decision that took real courage. She walked away from West Point and transferred to the University of Massachusetts Amherst to pursue nursing instead. The choice made perfect sense to those who truly knew her. Helping people was never going to come from a uniform. It was always going to come from her hands. At UMass, Maura settled into her studies, worked a part-time campus security job, and maintained a long-distance relationship with her boyfriend Billy Rausch, a former West Point classmate now serving as an Army lieutenant stationed at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. By every visible measure, she was building something real. But underneath the surface, small cracks had begun to appear. In November 2003, Maura admitted to using a stolen credit card to purchase food at several restaurants near campus. A deal was arranged 3 months of good behavior, and the charge would be dismissed entirely. For a young woman who had never once sought attention for her achievements, the quiet shame of that incident may have cut deeper than anyone understood. Then came February 5, 2004, 4 days before she would vanish forever. Maura was sitting at her shift behind the campus security desk inside Melville Dormitory when her phone rang. Her older sister Kathleen was on the line, freshly released from a rehabilitation center that same evening, struggling with the weight of her own broken relationship. The conversation, by Kathleen's own account, was ordinary. But something inside that phone call destroyed Maura completely. 3 hours later, a supervisor found her sobbing at her desk. When he asked what was wrong, Maura gave him only 2 words: "My sister." Kathleen later admitted she never understood why. When I heard she was crying after that, I couldn't understand why, especially because it's not like her to cry. And that right there is the first crack in the story of Maura Murray. A girl who never cried, suddenly broken by a conversation nobody could fully explain. Something was wrong. And 4 days later, the whole world would find out just how wrong things had become. Something broke inside Maura Murray on February 5, 2004, and whatever it was, she never let anyone see it fully. 2 days after the phone call that left her sobbing at her desk, her father Fred arrived at UMass to help her find a new car. Her old black Saturn was barely holding together, smoking heavily, engine failing. A vehicle her father flatly told her the police would pull over on sight. They spent the day searching dealerships, found nothing they could afford. That evening, Fred took her to dinner, handed her the keys to his newer Toyota Corolla, and drove back to his motel. Later that night, Maura attended a small gathering with friends. Then, without warning, she told them she needed to return the car to her father immediately. Right now. In the middle of the night. Even though she had been drinking. Nobody understood why. At 2:30 in the morning, she left. She drove toward Fred's motel on Route 9 in Hadley, and somewhere along that dark road, she lost control of the Toyota and slammed it into a guardrail. Nearly $10,000 in damage. No charges filed. But something inside Maura had clearly already broken long before that guardrail did. Fred later recalled looking at his daughter that night. She was upset but said it was okay. The next morning, he learned insurance would likely cover everything. He rented another vehicle, drove Maura back to campus, and left for Connecticut. He had no reason to believe anything was deeply wrong. That was the last time Fred Murray saw his daughter, and neither of them knew it. The following night, Fred called Maura at 11:30. They spoke briefly. He reminded her to collect the accident forms. She agreed. She told him she would call back the next evening around 8 so they could finish the insurance paperwork together. That call never came. Because the morning of February 9, 2004 was the last morning Maura Murray spent as a person the world could find. After midnight, she sat alone at her computer and opened MapQuest. She searched directions to 2 locations, the Berkshires in western Massachusetts and Burlington, Vermont. She printed both. But she booked nothing. Not a single room. Not one reservation anywhere. Her sister Julie later offered the clearest explanation anyone has ever given for what Maura may have been thinking that morning. I think she wanted to get away and clear her head. I think she used a death in the family as an excuse to buy her some time. She was a nursing student. She had clinical. It was a reasonable excuse where no one would ask further questions. At 1 in the afternoon, she emailed Billy. "I love you more, stud. I got your messages, but honestly I didn't feel like talking too much to anyone." I promised to call today, though. Love you, Maura. 24 minutes later, she sent a separate message to her professors and her nursing program supervisor. She would be absent for the rest of the week. There had been a death in the family. Her family later confirmed nobody had died. Not one person. So what was Maura Murray actually running from? At 2 in the afternoon, she called a hotel booking line for Stowe, Vermont. The reservation system was unavailable. Only a recorded message played. She left no booking. At 2:18, she left Billy a voicemail. I love you. I miss you. I want to talk. Then she started packing. Clothing, toiletries, textbooks, birth control pills, a phone charger. The accident forms her father had reminded her to collect. When investigators later entered her dorm room, something stopped them cold. Her belongings had been boxed up and stacked neatly against the wall. The artwork had already been removed from every surface. The room looked like someone preparing to leave permanently. At 3:30 in the afternoon, Maura climbed into her black Saturn and drove away from campus. 10 minutes later, surveillance cameras captured her alone at an ATM Calm, composed withdrawing $280, most of what remained in her account. She then walked into a nearby liquor store and purchased roughly $40 worth of alcohol. Vodka, Bailey's Irish Cream, Kahlua, a box of Franzia wine. Security footage confirmed again she was completely alone, but the amount troubled investigators immediately. It was far more than one person would need. Was she planning to meet someone? Or was she simply trying to carry enough to survive whatever darkness was waiting at the end of that road? At 4:37 in the afternoon, Maura checked her voicemail one final time. That became the last confirmed activity ever recorded from her phone. Then, she drove north, into the snow, into the dark, into the mountains of New Hampshire. Her fuel tank was nearly empty. A warm winter coat sat folded in the back seat. Snow chains rested in the trunk. Some things carefully prepared, others dangerously left behind. And by the time the sun fully disappeared from the sky that evening, so had Maura Murray. Sometime after 7 in the evening, a quiet road in rural New Hampshire swallowed Maura Murray whole. Route 112 was not the kind of road people drove at night without a reason. It twisted through isolated woodland, cutting sharp bends into frozen hillsides with no streetlights, no cameras, and no witnesses for miles. A few scattered homes sat back from the road, far enough that whatever happened in the dark stayed in the dark. The temperature had dropped below freezing. Snow and ice covered the surface of the road. And somewhere along a particularly dangerous bend, near a weathered old barn that locals recognized on sight, Maura's black Saturn left the road and buried itself into a snowbank. The airbags deployed. The windshield cracked. The engine died. And Maura was still there. For now. Inside her home, directly beside that bend, a local woman named Faith Westman heard a loud crash outside. She walked to her window and looked out. She could see the Saturn clearly lodged against the snow. Hazard lights blinking, someone moving near the vehicle. At 7:27 in the evening, Faith picked up her phone and called the Grafton County Sheriff's Department to report the accident. But then she mentioned something that immediately confused investigators. She said she could see a man inside the vehicle, smoking a cigarette. Her husband Tim disagreed completely. He had been watching the same scene and told investigators what he believed Faith had actually seen was a woman holding a cell phone, the glowing screen mistaken in the dark for a lit cigarette ember. 2 people, the same window, 2 completely different accounts. That contradiction alone would haunt this investigation for years. Across the road, another neighbor named Virginia Murat stood watching from her kitchen with her husband John. From our kitchen window, we saw a car down the road with hazard lights flashing and someone moving around the vehicle. Then a school bus came around the bend. The driver was a local man named Arthur Atwood, known to everyone in the area simply as Butch. Butch Atwood was a large man, familiar face, a fixture of that quiet road. He pulled his bus over beside the crashed Saturn and approached. He later described exactly what he found. The engine was no longer running. The hazard lights were flashing. And standing outside the car, cold and shivering, was a young woman he did not recognize. I saw no blood. She was cold and she was shivering. He offered to call the police. She refused. She told him she had already called and a tow truck was on its way. But there was no cell phone service on that stretch of Route 112 in 2004. Maura Murray could not have made that call. Butch then offered something else: she could wait safely inside his home, just down the road, until help arrived. She refused that too. So Butch climbed back into his bus and drove the 100 yards home. And here is where the clock becomes critical. How much time did Butch actually spend with Maura at the crash site before leaving? According to Butch himself, only a few minutes. Which means from the moment he drove away to the moment police arrived, the window was terrifyingly small. CBS News Boston reported that when police finally arrived at the crash scene, Maura's car was there, but the young woman was gone. A passerby had offered help. She waved them off. And when officers pulled up, there was nothing left of Maura Murray except a locked car and the belongings she had left behind. Inside the Saturn, Sergeant Cecil Smith found a broken box of Franzia wine spilled across the back seat, an empty beer bottle, a Coke bottle filled with red liquid that smelled strongly of alcohol, printed MapQuest directions to Burlington, Vermont, a stuffed animal, a book titled Not Without Peril, blank accident forms, gloves, jewelry, makeup. But the things that mattered most were missing: her cell phone, her wallet, her debit card, her credit cards, her driver's license, her keys, and the coat she would have needed to survive the freezing New Hampshire night still folded in the back seat. Why would a woman fleeing on foot in below freezing temperatures leave her coat behind? That question has never been answered. Smith walked to the Westman home, then to Butch Atwood's bus, where Butch was still sitting completing paperwork. Smith knocked on the window. According to Butch, the very first words out of the officer's mouth were simple. He asked where the girl was. But Butch had no answer, and from that moment forward, neither did anyone else. By the time Sergeant Cecil Smith finished speaking with Butch Atwood that freezing February night, one terrifying reality had already settled over the crash site on Route 112. Maura Murray was gone. Not injured, not wandering nearby, not waiting inside a neighbor's home. Simply gone. Smith and Atwood immediately drove through the surrounding area, searching for any sign of her. They covered the dark roads, shining lights into the tree lines, scanning the frozen landscape for movement. Nothing. The following morning, authorities officially issued a be-on-the-lookout alert for Maura Murray and began treating the case as a missing persons investigation. On February 10, investigators brought in a tracking dog to search the area around the abandoned Saturn. The dog was given one of Maura's black leather gloves from inside the car to lock onto her scent. What happened next became one of the most significant details in the entire case. The dog tracked Maura's scent approximately 100 yards east from the crash site. Then it stopped completely. No trail into the woods, no path toward any of the nearby homes, nothing leading into the darkness of the surrounding forest. The scent simply ended at a point in the road where a vehicle could easily have pulled over. To investigators, that detail pointed toward one deeply troubling conclusion. Maura Murray very likely got into a car, and whoever was driving that car has never come forward. How does a person vanish completely from a road where people were watching from their windows and leave behind not a single footprint in the snow? The search expanded rapidly over the following days. New Hampshire fish and game teams arrived with snowmobiles, additional search dogs, and thermal imaging equipment. State police widened the perimeter. Volunteers combed through the surrounding woods and hillsides. Every search came back empty. Then on February 17, 8 days after Maura vanished, CNN journalist Soledad O'Brien interviewed Fred Murray and Billy Rausch on national television. During that interview, Billy revealed something that sent a chill through everyone following the case. While traveling toward New Hampshire after learning Maura had disappeared, Billy claimed he received a voicemail on his phone while it was switched off. The message contained almost nothing, just breathing. And then, near the end, soft crying, a faint whimper. I could only hear breathing, and then towards the end of the voicemail I heard what was apparent to be crying and then a whimper, which I'm certain was Maura. Investigators traced the call to an AT&T prepaid calling card. Maura's sister Sharon had purchased 2 of those same cards for Maura during Thanksgiving, months before the disappearance. But the trail ended there. Police eventually concluded the call may have originated from the American Red Cross, a standard explanation that Maura's own family refused to accept. Sharon Murray later stated clearly that the call could not be traced and that the Red Cross explanation made no sense. If it truly had been an automated Red Cross welfare call, why did it never come again? That question has never been answered. Then, only 1 month after Maura vanished, another disappearance struck the region. A 17-year-old girl named Brianna Maitland finished her evening shift at the Black Lantern Inn in Montgomery, Vermont, 66 miles from where Maura had crashed, and walked out into the night. The next morning, her car was found backed into the side of an abandoned farmhouse approximately 1 mile from her workplace. Headlights still on, Brianna nowhere to be found. The similarities between the two cases were impossible to ignore. Same region, same time frame, both young women. Both vanished after leaving their vehicles behind with no explanation. Fear immediately spread that a predator could be operating across the Vermont and New Hampshire corridor. Fox News reported that New Hampshire investigators announced a large-scale search along Route 112 for Maura Murray, with Julie Murray confirming the effort covered territory 5 miles from where her sister's car was found, in the exact easterly direction Maura appeared to have been moving on the night she disappeared. Yet despite every search, every cadaver dog, every thermal scan, and every ground team sent into those mountains, not a single confirmed trace of Maura Murray was ever found. Not clothing, not personal belongings, not a body. 21 years of searching. And still, only silence. Fred Murray spent years walking that same road on weekends, retracing every step, staring at the same bend in the road where his daughter's car had sat abandoned. He told reporters he refused to stop. She was in good spirits and had no worries or reason to run away from her life. And yet she was gone, and the road that took her has never given her back. "21 years. That is how long the disappearance of Maura Murray went without a single named suspect, without a single piece of forensic evidence strong enough to push the case past the wall it had sat behind since February 2004. And then, March 2025, everything shifted. But before we get there, we need to walk through the people and the evidence that kept this case alive for 2 decades, because nothing about what happened in 2025 makes sense without understanding what came before it. In late 2004, a local man named Larry Moulton approached Fred Murray and handed him a rusty, stained knife. According to Larry, the knife belonged to his brother, a man with a criminal record who had lived less than 1 mile from the crash site at the time Maura disappeared. Larry told Fred he believed the knife had been used in a crime connected to his daughter. The knife was turned over to New Hampshire State Police. Results were never publicly released. But the story did not stop there. In 2006, investigators obtained permission to enter the former residence of Larry's brother, a property that had since changed hands. They brought cadaver dogs inside. The dogs reacted strongly inside an upstairs closet. Carpet samples were collected and handed over to investigators for testing. Those samples were later lost. The chain of custody was never fully explained, and police never publicly confirmed whether any forensic analysis had been completed. In 2016, investigators returned to the same property and found what appeared to be human blood on wood panels inside that same closet. The wood chips were taken away for analysis. No results were ever announced. Think about what that means. 2 separate searches, a cadaver dog reaction, apparent blood evidence, a knife turned over to police, and not one public answer from investigators. Is that the behavior of a case being properly handled? Beyond the A-frame house, another name had quietly attached itself to this investigation for years. Rick Forcier, a local man who lived near the crash site, waited 3 months before coming forward to tell police he may have seen Maura running along Route 112 on the night she disappeared. He refused to allow police to search his property. He replaced his vehicle with an identical model around the time Maura vanished. And when people in the community asked him about the disappearance, he reportedly joked that Maura was living at his house and that she was a great cook. No evidence has ever directly connected Rick Forcier to what happened that night. But his behavior and his silence never stopped raising questions. Now consider all of this. A knife with staining, lost carpet samples, cadaver dog reactions, a neighbor who waited months to speak, a local man who refused to search, an entire community sitting on top of whatever truth Route 112 is still hiding. And then the fingerprint. People magazine reported on the 21st anniversary of Maura's disappearance that her sister Julie stated clearly the overwhelming family consensus is that Maura was met with foul play at the hands of someone. Julie added, one listener could hold the key to unlocking this mystery. And in March 2025, that mystery cracked open for the first time. A fingerprint found inside Maura Murray's abandoned Saturn was matched through the National AFIS database to a former West Point cadet named Stephen Baldwin, previously known as Stephen Finkelstein. Stephen had attended West Point at the exact same time as Maura. According to his own account, they had a relationship while both were cadets. He left West Point within 1 week of when Maura withdrew from the academy. 8 months after Maura disappeared, he legally changed his name. In 2020, Stephen Baldwin was arrested in Ohio on 39 charges including animal cruelty, fraud, and bribery. His fingerprints were entered into the national database. A short time later, New Hampshire State Police Cold Case Unit Detective Charles West contacted Ohio authorities confirming that Stephen's prints had matched evidence inside Maura's car. Detective West reportedly named Stephen his #1 suspect. Then, Detective West abruptly resigned from the cold case unit. The FBI visited Stephen in spring 2024 and questioned him directly. According to Stephen, he was told his fingerprints had been found on a CD or CD case inside Maura's car. He denied any involvement in her disappearance. In March 2025, Stephen Baldwin was sentenced to 15.5 years in prison in Ohio on the unrelated charges. He remains alive. He remains in custody. And the fingerprint inside Maura Murray's car still has no official explanation. 21 years of silence, and the closest thing to an answer this case has ever produced is sitting in an Ohio prison cell, denying everything. After everything we have examined, every witness, every clue, every suspect, every search that came back empty, one possibility continues to stand above the rest. Maura Murray got into a car with the wrong person. The tracking dog lost her scent at the road. Her coat was still on the back seat. Her gloves were still inside the car. No footprints led into the woods. She was panicked. She was desperate to leave before police arrived, and in that moment, she may have accepted a ride from someone she did not know. Someone who has never come forward. 22 years after Maura vanished, the New Hampshire Cold Case Unit confirmed they are still working daily on this case, using new technology that did not exist in 2004, pursuing every credible lead with state and federal partners. Decades may pass, but the determination to find answers for Maura's family does not diminish. Somewhere out there, the truth still exists. The only question is whether anyone will finally speak it. So now, what do you think really happened to Maura Murray that night? Leave your thoughts below. Because in a case like this, one comment, one memory, one detail that seems small could change everything. This case has involved extensive research and is incredibly time-consuming to cover from every angle. If you want to read the complete investigation, I will add all the resource links in the description below. You can go through them there. If this story moved you, if you believe Maura's memory deserves to be kept alive, please share this video. Not for views, for her. And if you are new here, welcome to Hidden Truth. This channel exists because every disappearance is a story. And behind every story is someone who still hopes. Subscribe and stay with us, because there are many more stories that still need to be told.